Hi, my name is Shyam Madhavan. I want to thank you for having us here today. I'm an MBA student here, first year. This is Jason Bourne. Not that one, not of the films. He's actually catching a plane afterwards, some secret thing. Jason and I have been working on Fetcht for the last year to 18 months. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about a little story that I think will explain how we got here and what it's supposed to do. So this last Christmas, I got a Kindle for my birthday. My birthday's a couple days before Christmas. I got a Kindle. The day after Christmas, I got on a plane, and I was going to Hong Kong. 10 minutes before the flight, I'm looking at the Kindle, and I realize I haven't gotten a book for this thing. I need to get a book. I need something to read. So I open it up, go to the store, and I see the first 50 recommendations they make. It's a variety of different books, most from the New York Times bestseller list. And there's customer reviews, and there's all kinds of stars and this and that. But truthfully, it was a bit of an information overload. I had 10 minutes to go. I didn't know what I wanted. And at kind of the very last minute, I remember a friend of mine had recommended me a book the previous week. Remember that, found it, bought it, Bob's your uncle, got on the flight. That little story, kind of, the word of mouth component of that story brings us to Fetcht. Jason?
So our thinking on this idea is the best suggestions come via word of mouth. Word of mouth is and always has been the most effective marketing strategy that we know of. The reason why it works well is because it's social filtering. This is people in charge of passing recommendations amongst themselves. It's based on trust, and this trust dynamic can be changed and modified. You see here an example of a guy who likes cameras, who knows cameras very well, is going to pass you a good camera recommendation. A guy who knows motorcycles, say, very well, going to pass you good motorcycle recommendations. As long as they're passing you good recommendations, you're going to take their recommendations. Once they stop passing you good recommendations, you're not going to take their recommendations anymore. Contrast this against a collaborative filtering approach, which is what most online websites use right now, where you have statistics based upon all the other people who bought the same 3 items that you bought. Well, it's a very large sample set to get the statistics working, but it has a ton of extra stuff in there. The dynamic of trust networks here, of word of mouth, lets you find the recommendations from Blue Tie Guy, but not only that, use his trust network to find the recommendations of the people that he knows as well. Again, a dynamic trust network as opposed to a statistical algorithm which tends to figure out which products people who bought the same things might like. So what we're trying to do here, as opposed to collaborative filtering, is basically trust networks. We're trying to build networks out, bring word of mouth online to online commercial sites, online vendors. The idea being that if we can mimic the word-of-mouth dynamic online, we can create a better recommendation algorithm, better recommendation system. The way this would work is products or recommendations would filter through the network, would aggregate preference decisions as people vote on them. I like this, I don't like this. That tends to separate out different pieces of the network, and immediately you've got sort of community segmentation. So a large site, we talk a lot about wine.com here, a large site like wine.com that has millions of people on there would be able to segment its target market, its user base, into different subsets, some of which like sort of Pinots, some of who like white wines. The best thing about this, too, is that it's not the company itself, the online merchant who's doing this, it's the people who do it. If you could provide them the right tool, they'll find each other.
So let me tell you another little story. In the brick and mortar world, if I want to buy a bottle of wine, you're going to hear us talk a lot about wine. Please don't read too much into that. If I wanted to go buy a bottle of wine, I'd go to Trader Joe's, I might go to the wine store next door, and I'll do one of either two things. If I know exactly what I want, I'll go buy exactly what I want. If I don't, and this is the more likely scenario, I'll go through the aisles, look at labels, read the fancy French words, understand zero of it, and then either pick based on my price range, or if I'm a smart guy, I'll go to the guy at the counter and say, I like Riojas and I like Malbecs. You tell me what to buy. He's going to use that information I gave him, and he's going to give me a recommendation. This is what we're trying to do. Take this kind of word-of-mouth dynamic and put it online. You're going to hear us talk about a lot of different things. We're not trying to sell you a fancy new technology that does something you've never heard before. We're trying to sell you a fancy new technology that is exactly what you do every day online.
So here's a demo that we put together that would illustrate how it would work for a site like wine.com. As Shyam was saying, in the brick and mortar world, you would go into the store and you would find the merchant or the guy behind the counter. You'd ask him. You'd say, I like these 3 wines. I like this Shiraz, this Mont Blanc, this Firehouse Red. Find me more wines that I might like. Here online, you don't have access to the guy to talk to, but you do have a network of people who are also shopping at the same sites. We can show you where these recommendations are coming from. I put this recommendation in, but I got this one from Bob and this one from Ted. Because I have these 3 wines in my recommendation list, I am being recommended these on the bottom. But the important bit of this is not the recommendations that I get on any given time. The important bit of this is the network itself. This is the network that's giving me those recommendations. So Bob is sending me a lot of recommendations. And Bob has friends of his own where he's getting recommendations from. Again, a dynamic network where if he starts getting good recommendations from somebody new, he can add that person to his network. If he stops getting good recommendations from somebody in his network, he can eliminate that link. So this constantly evolves even when you're not on the site, such that the recommendations you're getting are the product of everybody else's filtering process. That's important. It's a human filtering process, not a statistical one. So as we go through here, we could say, all right, well, there's some other things in here I might like. Very simple activity on the part of the user. We're not trying to ask them to build a profile or fill out any huge forms. All we want to say is, I like this, I don't like this. I like this wine. The network adjusts. It gives me 2 more nodes who I might want to add to my network. It shows me how similar they are, how much activity they have on the site, and how popular they are in general. If I find that Jerry has a wine that, oh, I've tried this before, I really like it, I might want to add Jerry to my network. And now he becomes one of the nodes who's going to give me the recommendations. Those recommendations are going to show up down here. By the same token, if we know that we don't like this particular wine, like this Nair Syrah down here, we can say I don't like it, and new suggestions are generated based on that information. So the user is doing very simple activities. I like, I don't like. And those activities, when combined with some of the graph filtering algorithms that we have, that I've been working on in grad school for applied math, those are what recompute the network and then give you the new recommendations.
So the opportunity here, we've kind of thrown a lot of technobabble at you, and I'll bring it back down to layperson speak. It's, the internet, not so much of a new thing anymore. E-commerce sites is not an option. Everyone's got one. Everyone has to have one. You need not necessarily even have a brick and mortar shop anymore if you're on the internet, right? How do you increase that market share? It's not going to necessarily be by simply expanding your product lining, your product list. The attention span of anybody from this generation, and certainly more as a function of the internet, is decreasing. Right? If I don't see exactly what I want on the internet, I'm done. I've got the attention span of a bumblebee. So adding 100 different products from the online merchant side isn't going to do it. What they need to do is give me exactly what I want, or do their damnedest to try and do it. The 2 ways they can do this are focusing on product recommendations, personalized product recommendations, and adding customer reviews. It gives me some reason to look a little bit more into it. Those 2 aspects are 2 different forks in the road, as it were, and 2 different things that they're trying to do, both individually and together. Fetcht does both of these things together. The bonus on top of this is that in the internet's current iteration, in the business world as is, companies constantly are doing market research, right? Analyzing their customer base. How much of my customer base spends this much money? How much of my customer base is over 35? How much of my customer base makes more than 80 grand? Our network takes passive user input and segments that all for ourselves. As we saw in the little guide pictures from before, we can segment these networks all into themselves. In the wine world, we can segment a customer base that's interested in red, Spanish reds bias. And when a new Spanish red comes out and the guys at wine.com want to push it, they send it to those guys. They don't send it to everybody. They don't inundate every user with an email. Keep it focused.
So the benefit, and again, the difference between collaborative filtering and this kind of an algorithm is that, first of all, it's much more personal because you're actually attached to a user. So you could have a user from wine.com who is making recommendations. Once you stop getting good recommendations from this guy, you opt out and you go find somebody else. But it opens up, wine.com has a tremendous community of users, as does Amazon.com and all these sites. What we're trying to do here is leverage the community. When you segment the community, you get more information about it. And if your users can segment your community for you, it provides you with a whole new marketing channel.
So our general marketing plan, again, bringing it back to wine.com, why do we keep using that site? Well, if I need to go buy milk, which I do occasionally, or I need to buy gas, or I need to buy any kind of my day-to-day stuff. These are commodities. I don't need a recommendation. I don't need you to tell me that this 2% is way better than this 2%, because it probably isn't. But wine, is not that. Wine is not. It's a good example of why we seem to fit in this space, because it's a taste-based product. Taste-based products with in arenas rather with high data are an ideal place for us, because we can develop a piece of technology. Our technology fits nicely in, takes the available data, uses minimal user interface, and gives them a whole wealth of information from stuff they already have. So focusing on an arena where people require, if not absolutely demand, at least require kind of more input than simply an initial impetus to go buy something, somewhere where we feel like we can fit in well.
In the initial sales plan, we're planning on distributing the software as a service, and that helps to lower the initial cost for the online merchant. We basically house the technology, keep the startup costs as low as they can be. There's some customization that's involved up front. We charge on a bin basis. We call one of these things that we talked about before, where you put your wines into it, a bin. So that's a more generic term. It would be a wine list on wine.com. It would be a closet if it's in some other fashion site. So for each bin, it's $5 per bin. A user can have more than one bin. That's the recurring yearly cost, and then we take a certain portion of the purchases that are made through our engine. So basically, if somebody buys something, if we are the direct result of that purchase decision, we take some chunk of that.
A channel partnership that we've explored and we feel pretty strongly about is a partnership with advertising firms. Advertising firms have a relationship with these companies that have this onus to kind of expand their market share. They've got the relationship, but they don't necessarily have this ability, this technology to give them. We feel that with our technology and in a partnership with these advertising firms who have these relationships, we not only add a menu item to their services offered to their clients, but kind of facilitate our own marketing through their relationships. It's symbiotic, as it were. Our target customers in this arena, as we were talking about, wine.com, include the following.
So New York Times is going to start charging its online readership in January of next year. News is becoming a commodity online, as is a bunch of the things that we're talking about right now. They're looking for some way to add value to news stories, which are everywhere. They're a click away. What's nice about the New York Times is they have a tremendously vibrant community that has not yet been tapped. They're starting to look into having a system where you can follow somebody and see the stories they read. Something like this, though, would allow them, again, to segment their different readership and take advantage of, say, 60 years of past stories. Once you have these communities set up, you might be able to start using some of the old material that you wouldn't know how to repurpose otherwise.
I gave you my little Kindle story before, but how Amazon kind of fits in here is if I click on Amazon today, and I did yesterday, the recommendations that come up to me are apparently according to Amazon, I should only be reading finance books, management books, and accounting books because I bought my textbooks on there. I really only like reading that stuff for school. I have a whole wealth of other genres I'd like to pay attention to that Amazon can't currently advise me in. But with a trust-based network, I could be open, my interest in subject matter could be open to a much greater spectrum than those things that I happen to have just purchased.
So we throw Babies R Us here as sort of just an exemplar of expectant moms and recent moms. Tremendously active user group. Tremendously active user groups are fantastic for this kind of system because they will do a lot of recommendation generation. They're very interested in spending a long time on the site and figuring out exactly who are their kindred spirits that they can trust.
Lastly, we have Yelp up here. Yelp is not necessarily, it's a bit off the beaten path with the kind of product stuff that we've been talking about. The reason we want to include it is because we kind of want to demonstrate the real scope at which we think our technology can fit in the grand scheme of things. When I go onto Yelp today, I say I want to look at an Italian restaurant in DuPont Circle. It's going to give me a bunch of recommendations, a multitude of different star ratings, and I'm not necessarily sure if I buy into all of it. For the most part, it's probably good. But if I had a reason to trust any one review over the other, that would be valuable information to me. If I'm at a party and my friend Jason says, I heard a guy say that restaurant's pretty good, whether or not I like it, I'm going to remember it. This is the same paradigm being employed on a review site. This is what they're trying to do anyway. We just think we can do it better.
And to give you a little taste of how that would work on Yelp, so 6 degrees of separation is a powerful concept because it allows you to traverse that population graph very quickly. So on a site like Yelp, just knowing a couple of people who have reviews like you would open up their networks as well. So a couple of simple decisions would allow you to take all of the reviews, or many of the reviews who are closer to what you're looking for right to the top. So that's part of the key of the concept, is that it doesn't take a lot of user interaction to get these things working.
So the space, what does the space look like now? The space is quite competitive. There's three different ways that people are competing in this space. Amazon, Netflix, you guys know these names. Everyone knows about the Netflix prize that was offered in the last few years, $1 million to improve their algorithm. They're still collaborative filtering based. They're doing it in-house. This is not their primary area of focus, but they have money and they've got the data and the work to do it. But they're using this collaborative filtering technology, which we don't feel very strongly about. The direct competitors that are in this space that are doing what we're trying to do is sell this recommendation engine to other e-commerce sites, or Strands, Baynote, Lumia, these other firms, who are doing this largely using collaborative filtering, but some are using other technologies. Data mining is a new one. There's some varieties of collaborative filtering in there. And then the real one that everyone's heard of and that we're fully aware of, go into different levels of detail on this, are your Facebook and your Twitter. Those are the social networks. Companies are going out, putting a Facebook page on, and expecting to leverage that social network to increase their own market share. I'm not entirely sure that I see the connection on how you expand your brand name to increase average order values, and this is where we think we fit in. Underlying a social filtering technology within an e-commerce site allows every user on that site to have an onus to increase their own sales, to increase their own purchases. Having your page on a Facebook, I don't know that I necessarily see the connection.
Overall, the strategy for the past year or so has been the online merchants want to take the social networks and pull them into their sites. We believe the right answer is to create the social network on your site. So this gives you a taste of the mathematics that I was doing when I came up with the algorithms and the idea that power the network itself. I was working on this when I was doing grad work in mostly graph theory and some stochastic simulation. The number you're looking at here, I'll cut to the chase because I know we're probably running out of time soon. The number you're looking at here is the average position in the suggestion list that the first good hit comes. So let me say that again. We put together a suggestion list for a particular user, and this is the way collaborative filtering works as well. Pass that suggestion list over to the user. He goes through the list. He says, the first good hit is at what position? It's positioned with traditional collaborative filtering. We're looking at 57.9, for example, or 89.1, or 129, depending upon what the size of your neighborhood is and what your data is, how many people you're drawing these recommendations from. And the reason for that is that it's not trust-based. You're not talking about targeting certain people in certain areas. You're targeting people by virtue of the fact they bought the same thing and then combining everything that they've bought. So you can see that a trust-based network which filters out that is going to hit much higher in that list of recommendations that come through. The recommendation list is smaller as well, but the important thing is that you don't have to read 60 down to get to your first thing that you like.
So our 30,000-foot view, big MBA word there, operations plan is as follows. In the first 3 to 12 months, we hope to complete our prototype, the large part of which was the backbone to the demo you saw earlier. We hope to translate this into consulting opportunities, not quite yet selling the software as a service, but reaching into smaller e-commerce sites, your Grubhubs, not quite your Yelps, but your smaller sites. Fit in there, see what we can do, frankly, work out the last remaining bugs of our product, and look to expand our team. Right now, our team consists of the two of us. He's off spying half the time, so we need to hire a couple of other software developers, perhaps expand our marketing base as well.
Stage 2, we're looking to have a fully mature turnkey product that we can start selling with a normal sales force and all that good stuff. We're looking to probably get cash flow break even at some point there as well. We detail a little bit more about this in the business plan as far as how many clients we're looking to get at certain milestones. But we're looking for cash flow break even at 36 months.
And in stage 3, our 3-year to 5-year plan, we hope to kind of take the expertise we developed in the commercial space, build up a public site, which we hope will ultimately become the end-all, be-all of all recommendations, and reach a liquidity event. So that said, I'd like to thank you very much again for having us and for hearing us out.
So what is the level of investment that you're talking about to get to this 3-year break-even point? Is it only the proceeds from this program? Or
it is not. In the first year, in the first stage, we're looking to amass a total of somewhere between 150 to 200,000 to take us through that first sales cycle.
The sales cycles on this kind of stuff are tremendously long. So it takes a while to, when you're talking about changing a website, the way a website does business. We're trying to distribute a software as a service, but it always involves some sort of change, and that's a 12-month sales cycle for any kind of reasonable client.
What techniques do you have for seeding the networks? Initially, if I go on there, there's no one there to recommend. I walk away, I don't come back. How do you seed the network with enough users to make it valuable?
So this is a great question.
Yeah,
so this is one of the main recommendation. This is a problem with recommendation in general, right? Is that you don't have enough statistics to get it's the bootstrapping problem is what they call it. So initially, the way this works with the sort of more personal basis is that you can initially seed the network with people, with the kinds of people you think would be on there anyway, right? Part of the consulting process, part of the initial investment that the online merchant is making is we're going to come up with a menu of people. These are not real people, right? These are people that are generated by us, but who represent specific pieces of the site. They know who their demographics are by and large. We start with those pieces. The users come on, they latch onto those people, but then once they've latched onto those nodes, they're in contact with one another. So that's the bootstrapping.
So the quick and dirty way to look at this is let's go back to the wine.com, right? This is as much a marketing tool as it is a piece of technology. So they know their market segments, right? You've got college students looking to spend 10 to 15 bucks on a bottle, and you've got bankers and doctors looking to spend 50 to 70 bucks on a bottle. Having kind of identified these segments, they employ I'm sure they employ a wealth of sommeliers who can identify an expertise in each of these areas. They become nodes, right? They become the first node that they offer. I go onto wine.com and I pick the one that I'm most likely to go with. His recommendations are going to come largely from the other people. Ultimately, that network starts with my first connection to him, and then everyone else that's also connected to him now becomes the first place I look.
Also, it's not that we're not doing this as we're not completely throwing out collaborative filtering. The statistical stuff that binds that is important, and it's useful for us as well because it does inform the network. We're just adding sort of more to it.
You said that you don't trust the whole Facebook in terms of building a network, and it's better to have a social network on your site. Why did you discard so quickly the fact that you can use Facebook Connect and other tools to bring in the existing networks to the sites, to your customers?
How many friends do you have on Facebook? You don't have to say the right answer. Just tell me.
600-ish?
600. How many of those people do you trust to recommend you a book?
Maybe about 100.
That's a lot. I mean, for my network, I would probably say maybe 5% or 3%.
Yeah, but you don't trust anyone.
It's my job.
Yeah.
The point is that if those networks had the proper capabilities to be able to do that, then I would say fine. But the tools are just not there. When you do Facebook Connect, you don't have the capability to say, I trust this guy in this area, and that's where I want to keep it.
It's that specificity that's really important, right? So say I've got 600 friends. I don't. Half of them, and this is just simply the nature of Facebook, are people I've met once, right? I just happen to know them casually. If I was to say 100 of those people are people I actually trust, I don't necessarily, and this is just to reiterate, I don't trust them all in the same arena. Pulling in Facebook Connect into my Amazon account, right, doesn't identify which of those 100 I trust for, books on China, right? Or it doesn't segment. It just brings in a network and kind of underlies that network, assuming that something will filter it out. We build a network on the underlying infrastructure and use that existing infrastructure to filter down to what you want.
And there's another side of that, too. There are a lot of people who you would trust on a book, but you've never met and don't want to be friends with.
Yeah, that's actually.
Who would be your ideal, perfect strategic partner?
So an advertising firm that would already have connections to online retail. So we would like to get in with somebody who has deep online retail experience because we do not have those connections right now. I mean, I'm working at sort of the second biggest online ad distributor currently and doing their analytics. So I have some knowledge of how the advertising market works. But we reference in the business plan, ideally, we would want to have CEO type or at least very strong strategic partner who is already playing in the sandbox.
Yep.
I'm not clear on how you're going to increase your users.
How are you going to encourage users to come?
Yeah, how are you going to build your user base?
So, I mean, wine.com right now.
Forget wine.com.
Well, okay, but it's as an example.
How are you going to do it?
Right. I'm trying to say that a site like that, I see no reason why I would want to put wines in a wine list right now. They have 14,000 wine lists on wine.com. People like to post. There's a, I don't know if you've heard about the 99-1 rule, where 1% of the site is made up of people who are, prolific posters. 9% are sometimes posters, and then 90% are the people who just sort of sit back. That dynamic pretty much shakes out across the internet. So if you get a large enough site, you're going to have prolific posters. You're going to find the supernodes very quickly. Now the question is, the stuff that the supernodes are posting, is that enough to draw me in and make me want to connect up to these people? The only reason why I'm going to do it is to get better recommendations.
The other way to look at it is that given that this is software as a service, it's plug and play, unless you go and opt to go play with your network, kind of do the demo stuff that we were showing you, you're not necessarily going to ever see us in the background. What you are going to see is the recommendations that they give you just getting better and better. So this is not something we have to convince you to do already. If you're shopping on there, we're going to make those recommendations better, such that instead of buying one thing, you buy three. We increase the average order value of each of the existing users, not necessarily try and expand the number of users. Yes?
So I didn't see any reference to Google Buzz.
Yeah.
How did you all prepare yourselves to get to that functionality?
So there are a lot of people who are trying to get down to doing this. The focus that we're taking is the much more graph theoretic focus, I want to say. There's a way to measure flow through a network that's highly mathematical and requires, I want to say, some amount of expertise. I think that our take on this is sort of that more analytic, more technological take, as opposed to the guys who are just saying, oh, well, we can bring your friends in, or we can do, Now, Google is a good example of a threat, right? They have a very deep engineering staff. They're able to start poking around with these kind of ideas. It's something we have to think about, honestly. I mean, the Googles of the world are going to be out there. We're trying to get into this space. What we'd like to do is build an expertise that's deep enough that we become maybe a target for them.
The good kind of target.
Yeah.
Thank you guys very, very much.
Thank you.